Hey everyone, it's Emily, and it's been a while since I've made a list type of video here on the channel. So today I want to share my top 10 Nintendo Switch games that I think every single JRPG fan should own. So I added a little twist to this video that's very similar to Alex from Backlog Battle's top 10 JRPG list, in that every single game that's mentioned here today will be from a different subgenre in JRPGs. So this list will have a balanced list of both Nintendo exclusive games as well as some third-party heavy hitters. And also I made sure that all the games mentioned here today are ones that are not out of stock and are still available to buy physically. So that means there are some great games that were omitted from this list, such as the Crossbell duology and some of the indie games that were printed from, for example, Limited Print Run games, with a small caveat, which I will explain further in the video. So there's going to be a ton of variety when it comes to the subgenres that are represented in this list, and I did take a couple of liberties in how I classified some of these subgenres. So this first one is technically not really a RPG subgenre, but it's one that I think should be represented in this list, and that is Nintendo exclusive IP RPGs. If you are a JRPG fan who is collecting for the Nintendo Switch, it makes sense that you should also look into the Nintendo exclusive RPGs that are available from Xenoblade, Fire Emblem, and the Super Mario RPGs. So between all of those amazing titles that are available on the Switch, the one I decided to pick as my representative of one that I think all JRPG fans should own is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So it's probably no surprise here that I decided to go with a Xenoblade game to represent the Nintendo RPGs. Fire Emblem games are also amazing, but I do think there's something special about Xenoblade that we really don't see anywhere else offered in the JRPG landscape. Now, between all of these Xenoblade Chronicles games that are available on the Switch, I decided to go with 3 because it really is the most polished out of all of the titles that have been released so far. They really refined the combat system, the story, and really tapped into some remarkable characters in its narrative. And I do think 3 is probably the most approachable title out of the bunch because of so many of the quality of life and polishing improvements they made along the Xenoblade and really Xeno series. But of course I had to choose Peak as an entry in my top 10 list. So definitely give the Xenoblade franchise, especially 3 here, a go if you haven't already. The next subgenre I want to touch on are action RPGs, and there are a lot of great ones to choose from. Unfortunately, I haven't played too many on the Switch as of yet, but one that I did that I really enjoyed is Ys Origin. This prequel is a refreshing entry in the Ys universe in that it's on the shorter side, and you also don't follow the main protagonist at all. Instead, you have a couple different main characters with different fighting abilities that are still using that great action combat sequences we've seen in the other entries. This game is also on the shorter side with lots of great replayability, so it's one that I think is a really good choice if you are looking for something a little bit different to add to your collection. And this is also a perfect entry point for anyone who hasn't experienced Falcom's wonderful action RPG series yet. Next, I want to talk about the traditional turn-based RPG, and there's so many great classic games that have been ported to the system, as well as kind of a modern take on this classic formula. But the game I decided to represent this subgenre is none other than Dragon Quest XI. This is my first ever entry in the Dragon Quest franchise, and I think I couldn't have picked a better entry point. While this does use the classic turn-based formula, it does also feel quite modern in its graphical presentation, as well as how the characters and the story was delivered. I found all the side characters just so charming, and I loved the kind of expansive world that you got to travel around in. And they really, I think, made it so that the classic turn-based combat felt pretty fresh, despite it being, again, in the traditional vein of how turn-based combat tends to go. This was a game I never felt bored in, and I also didn't mind the grind in certain areas. I just had a lot of fun throughout the game. I thought this played really well on the Switch, and it was really cool that you could also switch to the retro 2D version of the game and kind of switch between both the 3D and the 2D plane. So we just talked about the traditional turn-based subgenre, and so I want to switch gears to the more modern take on the subgenre and games that happen to kind of have their own twist on this classic formula. And so the game I decided to talk about in this section is Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE Encore. I know this game is a little divisive among some people, but honestly, I think this game is just so fun in how wacky it is. It just has so many interesting elements in it, from the idol music scene to the collaboration between Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei. It just has so much charm to it that it's a game that I've come to really adore. So while I had a lot of fun interacting with all the kind of quirky characters and some of the plot lines and dungeons that you go into, really I think the combat is what shines in this title. How it incorporated the Fire Emblem triangle system along with the SMT type of combat I thought was genius, and I just had a ton of fun just going through battles and seeing some of the kind of ultimate singing moves that some of the characters would do. It's just, I think, a game that has a lot of charm that we don't hear as much praise for it as maybe it deserves. Next up are strategy RPGs, and Nintendo Switch is home to so many great choices and ones that I think have a lot of range in how they handle. And I decided to omit Fire Emblem from this section because I think if you're into strategy RPGs and you own a Switch, you more than likely have at least one of the Fire Emblem titles. So instead, I decided to talk about triangle strategy. I really wanted to include one of the HD 2D games on here because I think the art style is just beautiful on the Switch. And I also really appreciated how triangle strategy kind of innovated on the subgenre, in that the focus isn't just on the combat like so many SRPGs tend to be, but there's also a lot of focus on storyline and character interactions, where you have to kind of weigh all the different decisions that are presented to you and decide on a lot of different moral dilemmas when it comes to making your decisions. I know I voiced some criticisms regarding the decision-making process in this game, but I do think it is a step in the right direction, and I'd love to see Team Asano to kind of tackle this type of formula once again and refine it a little bit. But I do think for what triangle strategy did achieve, it's a fun game that I thought deserved a spot on this list. Next, I want to talk about some non-farming cozy RPGs, and there are a number of ones that I think are perfect on the Switch. But the one that really has my heart is the Atelier Ryza series. Everdarkness and the Secret Hideout is the first entry in the Ryza trilogy, and I think it's also the best place to start in that you really grow with the characters in this game, and it's really rewarding to see kind of how they advance and grow as individuals throughout the trilogy. This is the first Atelier game that I played without the time limit, and I think it was a really great addition that really modernized the series and made it very approachable and, of course, cozy for many gamers. There's just so much charm with the characters and the environment, and I really enjoyed the combat system as well as the crafting alchemy system, where you get to gather various materials in your adventures and bring them back to your atelier, where you get to practice alchemy and create a lot of different weapon upgrades and other enhancements for your combat. I really adore this game so much, and that's why it made it to the cozy RPG subgenre spot in my top 10 list. Next, I wanted to touch on my representative of the monster taming and battling subgenre. And usually the game that comes to mind is Pokemon whenever you're talking about monster battles. But the game I wanted to talk about that I think is my favorite on the Switch when it comes to this subgenre is Digimon Cyber Sleuth. And what's really cool about the complete edition on the Switch is you get 2 games in one. So you get both the first Cyber Sleuth game as well as the sequel Hacker's Memory. So I might have a slight bias when it comes to the subgenre in that I really adore Digimon more than Pokemon, even though I do have a lot of fond nostalgic memories when it comes to Pokemon. But on the Nintendo Switch, I think Cyber Sleuth here really shines in how much content is available and just how much fun the monster evolution system works, where you get to train and level up your Digimon so that they become even stronger. This game is packed full of fun with a lot of interesting story notes and side stories and mysteries that you get to sleuth out and solve. And the Digimon evolution or transformation system they have is also a lot of fun, and I sunk in a lot of hours trying to get my desired Digimon to come forth and bring them with me to the turn-based battles. So this game has a ton of content, and it's also really reasonably priced on the Switch right now, so definitely one to look into, I think. Now I want to switch gears and talk about my representative for the real-time strategy subgenre. That's a little bit different from your traditional strategy RPG that kind of follows the Fire Emblem approach. And so the game I want to talk about is 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I really wish there were more sci-fi RPGs out there, but 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, I think, really excels both in its storytelling with its rather complex but interesting narrative and its balance with its RTS combat system. And I was really impressed with how varied the real-time strategy elements were. There are a lot of different characters with different weapon types you had at your disposal, and the different enemy waves that would come at you would also change with every single map. And with a number of different battles you have to go through throughout the game, I think the RTS side really had a good variety that made it enhance the narrative that it accompanied. So this is definitely another peak game that I had to add to this list. Now this next subgenre is one that I had a little difficulty in classifying, but for now I'm just going to call it a hybrid RPG, and that it really takes on a lot of elements from different genres in gaming that are not RPG related. And so the one I want to talk about is Rune Factory 4 Special, which is a farming RPG hybrid. So this game originally came out on the Nintendo 3DS and was one that I really adored when it came out. But this HD enhanced edition that's available on the Switch, I think is a perfect place to play it. I really enjoyed the gameplay, and this was actually my first ever game that involved farming. And I think how they used it was very approachable and not too overbearing like a few different farming games seem to be. And there's just so many other activities you could do in this game, from fishing to cooking and crafting to monster taming and going out on adventures and battling various foes and dungeons and romancing different villagers is a delight, and I think a good way to see whether or not the farming genre is something you might be interested in if you yet to explore that. Now, last but not least, I wanted to include a subgenre for indie RPGs, and there are a number of indie RPGs that are available on the Switch. Unfortunately, a lot of physical editions are kind of released through limited publishers, so the one that I'm going to be sharing was released through a limited publisher, but it also now has an Asian English edition, so you're able to pick up a physical copy and still play it, and that is for Anno Mutationem. This is a cyberpunk action RPG that has a gorgeous pixel art style, and I really enjoyed just the general vibe of this game. It really has a cool atmosphere where you get to explore a futuristic cyberpunk world. And I also enjoyed the combat system where you got to choose between different weapon types and have various upgrades as you explore further in the game. So this is a cool indie RPG that I think JRPG fans should definitely look into, especially physically now that it's much more available in the Asian English as well as the Japanese edition that includes English on the cart. So those are my top 10 RPGs that I think every JRPG Switch owner should own in their collection. And I'd love to hear what some of your guys' choices are for some of the representative games for each subgenre, and whether you agree or disagree with me for some of them. And keep in mind that I think all of our lists are going to be different because we've all played different games, and I'm sure there are plenty of games that are currently sitting in my backlog that are definitely worthy of the spots on this top 10 list. So definitely let me know what some of your top choices are for these subgenre categories, and until my next video, bye guys.